It's squeezing past me.
I'm good. I may well do it if I get bored.
At the back.
Hello everyone, bringing World AGM. first of all, David's got an announcement about fire safety.
Just before we start, we're not expecting the fire alarms to go off, but if they do, it's exit behind you, one here, and it's round and out into the car park at the back there. But as I say, we're not expecting one, but in case it does go off, that's what we do. Thank you. You're welcome to it.
Thank you, David. Okay, so, as David said, welcome to Ipswich, the 2023 AGM for the Ring World. We'll get straight on with things. Hopefully you appreciate the pictures we've got up here. So this is Ipswich. I don't know whether the bells are, but the church is. Okay, so first slide please, David. Excellent, works. Okay, so the first thing then is to approve the minutes of the 2022 AGM. They have been circulated, so are there any corrections or amendments from that? Okay, well I think we can sign those as a true record then. Do you want me to sign them? Thank you. Okay then. So right, moving on then. So receiving the company accounts. Again, these have been circulated by Mary, but if we can just go through, so we've got some slides on this. Ooh, where'd that come from? Okay. Right, okay, so 2022 was actually a very good year for the Ring World financially. Very much thanks to the two royal things that happened, because that increased ringing activities during the year. Although postal subscriptions were down slightly, by about £2,000, donations were considerably up, so we received £26,791 in donations, which is a vast increase on what we've previously had, so that's excellent news. Merchandise sales for some reason were slightly down, advertising was up by a small amount, and interest receivable was up by £794. So overall, our income was up by £22,774, which is a fantastic position. We'll go on to the next slide, Dave. Okay, so expenditure. We also so we received the benefits from the work that had gone on previously around our contracts with Royal Mail and things like that. So our expenses were down by 16,000, just over 16,000. One of the big savings was actually in salaries, and I've really got to thank Will here, because the deputy editor resigned in, I think it was May, and then a new deputy editor didn't start until August. So there was a period when basically Will was handling it all on his own, and he did a fantastic job, as I'm sure you'll all agree. So that was a very big saving there on cost. So printing, unfortunately, the cost did go up. That was mainly down to paper prices, which it was a worldwide thing. There was nothing we could do about that. They just went up. The Royal Mail costs actually went down, so that we received the benefit of the contract that we negotiated with Royal Mail the year before. Computer costs were down. Merchandising costs actually were up slightly. Office costs up slightly, and bank charges the same, they were up slightly. But that was all offset by the reduction in salary costs, so we did very well there. Okay, next slide please. Okay, so this is our current, or the position at the end of 2022. So our current assets 238,593. Our liabilities just over 125,000. And we now have reserves of £190,598, which actually equates to about 8 months of expenditure from Marine World if we had no income whatsoever. So we're actually in a very strong position financially now, which is good. Okay, next slide. Based on that, we could see how the year was going in 2022. So at our budget meeting, which we held in November, we thought it would be very good to actually freeze the subscription rate. We believe that the subscription rate is quite critical to the success of the Marine World. I mean, it's always in danger of just going over the edge where people say, you know, is it actually worth it anymore? And then they drop off. So we thought that was an important thing to do. So we froze the subscription rate, and we raised salaries by 6%, which, you know, at that time, you know, the cost of living was definitely going up. So I think that was quite well received by the staff that we managed to give them a 6% wage increase. Fortunately, none of our staff are members of RMT. Or NHS. Okay. So the position now this year, even based on those things that we did, income is again better. Subscriptions are unfortunately down, which is a gradual decline. I mean, we all know that the people take printed magazines less and less these days. So unfortunately that number does continue to drop. But donations are up by 12,000, just over 12,000. And that's primarily down, well, two things really. One is that the suggested donation for performances, we put it up to £1 at the end of 2022. And actually that's been pretty well received. So a lot of people now are paying £1 a rate for performances. So that's helped a lot. But also, of course, there was the coronation, which again gave us quite a big boost to our income. Other sales, and this is very much thanks to Joe Lee, unfortunately not here today, who has been brought in not just to do administration but also to do marketing and sales and things like that. So our sales are actually up by nearly 8,000. Unfortunately, our costs are going in the other direction, which is not good. So they are worse. So our printing costs are up by just over 5,000 this year, and other costs are slightly down. So overall, we're in a worse position regarding cost. So we can go to the next slide. So we're expecting actually a good picture at the end of this year. About 35k we think will come in with a surplus of, which actually makes up for the two COVID years, where we did actually make quite a big loss. They are dependent on a couple of things. You know, if merchandise sales continue to improve, then that's one thing, and the other is if donations fall below about £4,000 a month, which is what they're running at, then that again will impact that number. So that's the good news. The bad news is that 2024 is not looking very good. Royal Mail are very likely to put up their costs of postage. They've done it in the retail market already. They haven't done it yet, or we've not seen anything around the business market, but it's very, very likely to cost them. So we don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to hit us for sure. And as far as we know, unless anybody knows better, there's no significant royal events like this year, or next year rather. Anybody know better? Maybe I'm asking the wrong person.
I have checked.
Thank you. Thank you, Prince Charles. Oh, King Charles, I mean. Okay. Right, so we go on to the Chairman's report. So thank you, Dave. Right, so... Oh, sorry.
Ask a question on the accounts, just to level with Salisbury. 2 points. One is in your report meeting, the
relate to numbers of postal subscriptions. You never talk about how many people are taking it digitally. The other point was, on your list of expenses, you've got composting, 14,284, which was a new cost. Exactly what was that for?
It may be a misspell. It's compositing, I think, isn't it? Yes. So thank you for raising that. So basically we switched from a salary position for compositing to a contract position. So the current person that does compositing, which is basically the layout of the magazine, is on contract rather than on a salary position.
Your spell check obviously didn't recognise them.
No. Well, I think they're both the right word, aren't they? Okay, I've just been pointing out that we need to receive the account. So, thank you, Mary.
Sorry.
For an Essex Association, I would like to know what the... Thank you. This is switched on.
It is switched on.
Thank you. Fred Bowen, Essex Association. Following on from the previous one, I think we would actually like to know the figures for postal subscriptions and online subscriptions, how many and how it compares with last year. I mean, maybe you haven't got the figures to hand, but perhaps you could circulate them and perhaps the report could include those figures in future.
Yes, I think this next bit, I think, does it not include them?
What would you like comparison of 2021? Sorry.
At the end of 2021, it was 2373 total, of which 461 were digital. At the end of 22, it was 2320 total, of which 470 were digital. So we continue the overall downward trend, but the slight upward trend of digital.
Okay, any more questions on accounts? Okay, so we're happy that we sign those or receive those accounts.
I just wanted to point out that both those figures were in the chairman's report.
Those figures are in the chairman's report, yeah, they are. Yeah, do we get a show of hands then, please, to receive the company account? Everyone? Okay. Anyone against them? Okay, thank you. Right, so moving on then. The chairman's report then. Some of these things were reported last year in the sort of update for where we were at during that year. But this is the sort of official position of what's happened. So, Chris Carrier, who was a compositor, not a combustor, he retired in January of that year, and we then employed on a contract basis, Sarah Carrick. So she joined then. She'd already been doing it from time to time anyway. She worked for the printer we had of those days, so she already understood the magazine and how it was put together. So it was a very natural fit for her to come across and do it on a contract basis, which she was happy to do. And she's done a very good job, as I'm sure you'll appreciate with the quality of the magazine. Jo Lee, she joined actually as a temp earlier in the year, and then we made a development in August 2022. She came in primarily to replace the previous admin lady, but then she was also very skilled in marketing, so Will has got her doing a lot of work around that as well. Anybody that advertises in the world probably has been contacted by Jo, and I'm sure she's tried to sell you something. Suppliers in the audience. I'm sure Taylor's here somewhere. Chris Teasdale, so this is what I said earlier about the deputy editor. So Chris Teasdale was deputy editor and he resigned in May. And Tricia Shannon, who was, I think she came last year, didn't she, to the meeting, but is not here this year. She joined us in August. The other thing that was reported at the last meeting was that Will was moving to Ireland, to Dublin. So just give a quick update on that. He did move, although he's here today. He's flown all the way back from Dublin for us. And it's actually gone very well. I mean, I think we were all a bit apprehensive about what would happen. You know, can it be done that remotely? I mean, it was already done fairly remotely anyway from Peterborough, but to move to Dublin was quite a big thing, and I'm sure it's a big thing for Will as well. So I think it's worked very well. I mean, is that your view, Will? Yeah, good. So he's a happy man, which is good. So that's good there. Again, I'd like to give a thank you to the volunteers. I'm sure we know these people. Richard Smith, I think he's here somewhere. Thank you very much for your support on Belvoir and where you are, but thank you. Richard. Bill Hibbert, I don't think Bill is here. Bill does other things around software, which is very, very helpful. Doug Davis, who was previously a director of the Ringing World, he does the court appeal proofreading, which he does very, very well. Phil Moyes and Nigel Herriot, it's a sort of moderation role around Belvoir that they carry out, and they do that very, very well. And then there's David Hull. So David has been the organiser of the Young Ringers competition for, is it 5 years? 5 years. Done an excellent job, worked his socks off with it, and he retired this year. He's no longer doing that. So a big thank you to David, who I don't believe is here, for all the work he's done with that. Thank you. So publications, I mean these things are in the Chairman's report, but we did, so during 2022 it's a little bit less than we did in the previous year, but the previous year I guess we had a little bit more time because of COVID. So in 2022 we produced the Little Green Ringing Book, which I think has been very popular. A little bit about it there, it's a prequel to the Purple Book, and it's at the sort of level just below the Purple Book, so it's the sort of plain Bob, Grants of Doubles type stage of bell ringing. Crib lines, so Simon Gay did an article, or a series of articles in the Ringing World about royal methods and maybe how they've been neglected over the years. So we produced a crib lines book with a lot of treble dodging royal methods in it. The Ringing World calendar, so I think there's been a fair bit of correspondence and notes on Facebook about this and things like that. We did have an experiment with a different format. It didn't really work very well. So if you've seen on our stand out there, we've actually gone back to previous year's format now, which was always very popular. Christmas cards, Claire Griffiths, who does a lot of sign writing, book writing type stuff, has done some new designs for our Christmas card collection as well, so hopefully you'll all see those and want to buy some of those as well. So that's publications. I think Alva wanted to say a little bit about the youth competition, so that's all there.
Good. Yes, so I just want to bring you up to date with the youth contest. We had a great, we were in Exeter obviously in the year we're talking about, but since then we've also been to York. So 2 months ago we were in York. It was a fantastic event. It went extremely well. The numbers are back up in terms of the teams entering, back up to pre-COVID, which is good to see. Some bands are still struggling with their numbers. Which is, a little bit sad, but we're in the right direction. We also saw a number of things going on. About 700 people were involved on the day. 700 people came to York. 240-ish youngsters, which is fantastic, all made the day. And you know, I know it's a very exciting event for them. I hear people talking about it years after, literally. You know, I went when I was 15, I'm now 25, I still remember. It's an exciting day. And I know we inspired ringers, so as far as I'm concerned, as long as, you know, if one youngster leaves super inspired as a result of that day from each tower, each band, I think it's well worth it. But there were 240 youngsters there in the day-ish, but there were a large number of hangers-on. So what is happening is even more people are coming with the youngsters, so it's becoming a bigger trip for each band to organise and bigger for the hosting city to organise. So it was around about 320 hangers-on. It's a lot of people to entertain and take care of for the day. And then the number of people involved in helping, about 175, spread over about 8 towers. But every single youngster had a chance to ring at York Minster, and I know they loved it. So we're getting the structure right. It is a very structured event. So a huge thanks to the York team, particularly Alison Hull, who was the main sort of coordinator for the York event. A couple of things to say. The Exeter event, the evening social hadn't been quite as successful. Who is that? Is that you, Barry? But we got the social event really sorted this year, so that was really, really much better, much more sort of organisation gone into it actually, and it paid off. It went really, really well. We had some trouble though. We had trouble getting the Minster for the awards ceremony. We couldn't move the evensong sufficiently early so that we could use the Minster for the awards ceremony. That caused a real breakdown with like 3 weeks to go. We had to find somewhere that would hold 500 people, and we found somewhere it didn't quite hold enough for all these hangers-on we didn't even know were coming. So it was tricky, and obviously we will be mindful of that next time. We need to know the direction of travel here. So we ended up in the Methodist Hall, which was a lovely venue, but I know some people were disappointed they couldn't go in. The hangers-on, all the youngsters were in there, and it was a really good award ceremony too. So congratulations to the WP and the DNN, who were the winners. I think I mentioned all the key things there. And big thanks to David Hull. To reiterate, David, really, it's a huge job all through the year. It starts as soon as the last one's finished and goes on, and the week before, you know, you don't need to be working that week, there's just too much to do, and that's me and my David, so there's a lot that's going on. Safeguarding, I should mention, we had some glitches, not glitches, but complaints that we had to deal with a year and a bit ago, which meant we really looked at our safeguarding policy. We put a lot of effort into that this year, getting that up to date, more structure, more defined, who's responsible for what, checking DBS certificates, things like this. And that went well, that was fine, and we still had to deal with some complaints, but it's all handled, it was all completely handleable, there was no real issue in the end. So we're all learning, we have to deal with these things the right way. Only other thing to say is Jo Creswell is taking over as the coordinator. She's already started work for the London event for next year. And thanks to our sponsors, there they are, Whitechapel Bells, Founders Company Girdlers, Wesley Engineering. We're very grateful for the money from all these people, and Talent Innovations. So thank you, and for this year, a special thanks for York Association, who was an additional sponsor this year. We were very, very grateful for that, because it's quite an expensive event. Thank you. I think you'll agree it's worth it, huh?
Okay, we move on, please. Thank you. Okay, so
This is just a small slide about the benefits that we have seen during 2022. We continue to see the benefits from the new contract with Pyramid Press. They do an excellent job of printing the magazine every week. They're always on time, and the quality is absolutely excellent. We've got a very good working relationship with them. It's working very, very well. Unfortunately, this year they did have to put their prices up because of paper costs, but for 2 years they did very, very well in terms of cost as well. Royal Mail, well, it's a very mixed story of Royal Mail. When they work really well. When they don't work, they're absolutely dreadful. We have no control over them really. So hopefully people do get their ringing word on a Friday, but there's no absolute guarantee. And it's very much down to local services as well. I mean, it's not a global thing. It's just that when your local postman decides he's actually going to work. Xero was the accounting software we moved to at the start of the year, 2022, and we've seen benefits from that as well. And not only one of which is the reduction in cost. It's a lot cheaper software to run than we were on Sage previously. So that's we've seen the benefits from all those things. As mentioned earlier, we clearly benefited from the increased level of ringing in 2022, and I've got a couple of graphs later which will show what that was. But that obviously because of the increased level of performances, the increased reporting in the ringing world and on the bell board, which was backed up through donations, just helped us an awful lot financially. As I mentioned previously, Jolie coming in with a marketing background has been a great benefit to us. Another thing which is fairly small, but we've also now got what's called a hot foil stamping machine in Andover, which will enable us to produce more custom things. So the diary, for example, we can do more customisation around that. Unfortunately, this next year's diary wasn't available today. We were hoping it would come through, but we will be able to put logos for suppliers, so sort of advertising revenue coming through that. Also being able to initial them and things like that. So we've got a lot more options there. We've also taken over I think people know that as the Viggers books, and so there's probably things we'll be doing around there, around hot foil stamping, and probably other products as well. So nothing's really happened yet, but hopefully this will lead to some nice new products. Okay, so these are the graphs I talked about. So it's quite interesting really. I've missed out 2020 and 2021 because they were down here somewhere, so they didn't really tell us very much. So the blue line is 2019, so that's before COVID. That's where we were. And it's fairly steady really, around 350 to 400 appeals a month. Then last year, which is the red line, then it peaked. You can see it peaked in May, which was the Jubilee. Interestingly, it didn't peak around the Queen's funeral. So presumably there are less appeals for some reason, and that quarter appeal graph shows something different, but that one, there's only a small rise there. And then there's this year, which is the green line, which shows an absolutely massive increase for the coronation. So I don't know how these things work, but for some reason it brings people out. Sometimes it brings people out, sometimes it doesn't. So I think generally we're looking around the 300 mark, probably, for appeals this year, and I suspect that'll be the trend going forward as well, unless the central council managed to do something to get more people in appeals. Okay, so next slide, quarter appeal. Okay, so this is the quarter appeal graph. So the same one, the blue line is so it's averaging around 1,500 quarters a month. then in 2022, you can see the peak for here for the Jubilee, and here for the Queen's funeral. So, of course, appeal ringers obviously, they like to come out and do these things, probably more than appeal ringers do, which is great. And then this year, the Green Line, a massive peak for the coronation. Again, I don't understand why that is, but it's good news. I don't suppose there'll be anything else the rest of this year. We'll probably just tick around the, what is it, about 1,200 mark, something like that. Okay. Do you have more conversations about this at the Central Council? Where we're going with ringing? I don't know. Is that something you do? Okay, moving on then. So this is how donations have gone. So again, you can see in 2022 the two events for Jubilee and the funeral, and then again this year the coronation. So you can just see what a massive effect it has on Ringing World financing. So yeah, it's a really bonus month, May. Over £12,000 again on the donation. Okay, good. Right. Just a few things I want to say on that before we go off it is, we did talk about subscription numbers, and it is mentioned in the Chairman's report. There is a sort of steady decline, unfortunately, and we'll come on to the survey later, which I was going to talk about. But what I want to say is that it would be great. One thing that I've noticed going around the country is that a lot of people don't know about the Ring World. You go to a local town somewhere. I was in Northumbria the other day on holiday, and I went around a local town there, and only about a third of the ringers there knew what the Ringing World was. So we obviously don't market it very well. We don't tell people, it's a magazine. It's a great magazine. I always say it's a magazine for bell ringers, written by bell ringers. That's what we've got. It's the best thing out there for bell ringers. And I just think we need to do a bit more about that. And this is really a plea to you. You're representative of your guilds and the societies out there. It'd be great if you could be ambassadors for the Ringing World as well, and go out there and just tell people that it exists. Show them the one and say, look, this is a magazine for you as a bell ringer. And maybe numbers will start to get back up again, which will be good. Just a play. Okay. Right. So can we receive the Chairman's report then, please? Or is there any questions?
Hi, Kath Coleman, Suffolk Guild. I was just wondering if there is any breakdown in the percentage of donations between peals and quarters.
I think we know the answer.
Can you give them to us?
I don't know off the top of my head, but of course peel ringers generally do give, and they give very generously. Peel ringers generally don't give.
Thank you.
James Ramsbottom, St Martin's Guild. Not a question as such, just a point of formatting. If you looked at the slide which shows the peel totals, I think the x-axis was wrong and all the months got shifted out one. I might be wrong on that point, of course, but back one more. Yeah, if you look at the bottom, it says month, then January, which I suspect because I expect the peak for this year to be in May, not April, and I expect the peak for 2022 to be in June, not May. So I think that's just something I wanted out.
Thank you, James.
Alistair Donaldson, Peterborough Guild. The clarification on the numbers of appeals, are they published peals and court appeals, or are they bellboard numbers? There are probably different.
We treat both in the same way. So
what
if
are the
they're on
numbers?
Bellboard or in the Ringing World magazine, then those numbers include them.
Tristan Lockhart, Leeds University Union. Do you foresee any side effects from an increased reliance on donations rather than subscriptions?
I think we know that there can be. So donations they're dependent on the performers here. So if ringing's not happening particularly, then donations clearly go down. So we know that is a factor. So if there was another pandemic or something like that, or a war or something, then clearly we would be, we'd have problems financially. So we're continually looking at our business model. We'd very much like to move to a subscription base if we could. Whether that's actually possible and whether it will be definite, we don't quite know. So, I mean, a lot of work has been done around the survey, and we've tried to analyse the numbers to see how we can change things, or if we were right to change things. But at the moment, we don't actually have a real answer on that.
Thank you.
John Harrison, Oxford Diocesan Guild. You mentioned the need for ambassadors. Could I suggest that you review the formal ambassadors programme which you ran, I think, under your predecessor, but 2, where a number of people volunteered to be ambassadors. They can give out promotional leaflets, and anybody who signed up got a concessional deal. I forget whether it's free or 50%. I think just saying vaguely, go out and promote it, you could probably do something more formal. And there is a precedent, you actually did it before, or other Ringing World did.
Okay, thank you. I'll look back at that because I wasn't aware of that, but yeah, that might be a very useful thing to do. Thank you.
Paul Flavel, Surrey Association. Have you looked at other church-type magazines, for example, choir or organ, to see what their models are and formats, and whether we could gain anything from looking at those?
No, we haven't.
Might be a useful idea.
Thank you.
Jackie Roberts, Guildford Diocesan Guild. I can say that we did look at all these things some time ago now, but the difference between ringing... can you hear me now? Yeah, okay. The difference between ringing and almost everything else you do is that you don't need any special equipment for ringing, so your advertising revenue is going to be correspondingly smaller. Whether you're an organist or a member of a choir, you need stuff. You need music, you need robes, you need all sorts of things, and they rely hugely on advertising revenue, which is not open to us. So it's worth a look, but that was essentially what people concluded when we looked before.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you. Fred Bowen, Essex Association. I think in relating to an earlier question, it's worth pointing out that the dependence on donations has been an obsession of the board for many, many years, and nobody has come up with a solution.
Clive Whittaker, Middlesex County Association. Just to follow up the point that Paul made a bit earlier on, doing some work for the Central Council a few years ago, I did find myself having a conversation with the Chief Executive of Making Music. That's what used to be called the National Federation of Music Societies. They have a journal, I think a monthly journal that goes out to their members, where they're quite keen to sort of fill in the column inches. So there was quite an openness on their part in terms of receiving some material from time to time from the world of ringing or from the ringing world that they could maybe include with an advert for the ringing world. So that sort of opportunity with similar organisations might be something to explore, where perhaps there are people who have an interest in the engineering side of the content that appears in the ringing world, the heritage side, but might not themselves be ringers.
very much. So we'll come on to this subject again a little bit later with the survey, and which I'll be talking about. We have got some ideas about what we might try. So hopefully you'll listen to that. So can we now receive the chairman's report, please? So all those in favour of the adoption. Thank you. Anyone? Okay, thank you. Right, so the next part then is appointment of directors. Thank you. Right, okay, so there are two members who are current members of the board who are up for reappointment. They're both served several years on the board, did a great job. They've been certainly very helpful to me. And I'm very grateful that they're willing to stand again. So that's Elva and Bob. And we have a new member who would like to become a member of the board. He's nominated Gareth Davis. Gareth unfortunately can't be here today. He has to do some ringing commitment somewhere. Ring for a wedding, okay. Now everyone hopefully has got a little voting slip. Because we don't know how to do this by now. Okay, so there was some information. Yeah, just while you're collecting the slip, I'll just say something about Gareth. So obviously you know about Bob and Albert because they've been doing it for a while. So there was some information circulated around Gareth's background with the notes like that. But I'll just read this out anyway. So Gareth has been ringing both cowbells and handbells since the 1970s. Much of his early ringing was with the University of London Society before he moved to Cambridge in the 1980s. He has rung peals on most number of bells from 6 to 18. He is now town captain at the 6 Bell Tower where he is teaching a new band using the learning the rope scheme. After working for the civil service, most of Gareth's career was spent in education, first as a primary school teacher, and lastly delivering in-service teacher training on the use of digital systems and resources. He serves as a governor and trustee for a number of schools and a multi-academy trust. Since retiring, he has completed a history PhD on ringing in Cambridge in the 18th and 19th century. He regularly gives talks about ringing and non-ringing audiences. He is a contributor to articles in the Ringing World and a member of the Central Council History and Archives Working Group. He is currently writing a history of the Cambridge Youths to coincide with the Society's 300th anniversary in 2024. A recent survey showed that history is among the most popular topics for Ringing World subscribers. Gareth hopes that his experience will help with the development of publications in that area, as well as contributing to the developing use of technology. So that's a bit about Gareth. You don't know. Okay. So if everyone likes to give me the ballot, there are some differences.
Sure.
Okay.
Can you have a confirmation of how many vacancies there are?
Yeah, we can have up to 9 people, and there are currently 5 members of the board.
If you're in a spot towards the end of one of the rows and harder to get to, could you please pass your slips towards the centre so we can collect them? Thank you.
Okay, so while things are being collected, we'll carry on with
Anyone's still got a slip that we haven't collected?
Okay, so those folks are going to go back to sign now. Okay, we can continue with business now.
Yeah, if I could, please. David Parfrey from Bath and Wells. I think you just said that you can have up to 9 seats on the board, and you have 5 taken. If appointed, presumably Gareth makes 6. Could you tell me instead how many you desire to have? Because that's not quite the same question as how many can you have. So if we understood how many you would like to have on the board, and then what are you doing to actively fill the vacancies that you wish to have?
Answer that one.
Very interesting question, okay. I can't say I've ever really thought about how many people we'd actually like on the board.
Could I suggest a skills matrix that you might draw up then to work out what skills you might wish to have on the board, what skills you have on the board, and what skills you're missing on the board, and that might begin to give you a clue as to what you need to go looking for.
Yes, well, we've certainly done that.
Okay,
and
that's your answer to the question.
as far as we're aware, we have all the skills that we require on the board. So we have finance people, we have legal people, we've got people like Elva who's great at marketing and things like that. So I think we've got the skills we need. Whether we need more people as well, I actually never really thought we particularly do. I mean, we'll never actively discourage anyone if they want to join. I mean, I tried to get a young person on the board recently, but unfortunately they were at a point in their career that they didn't really have the time to do it. So, yeah.
Following that up then, may I suggest that you consider your succession planning, because many voluntary organisations are suffering from a lack of volunteers overall. Sorry, Alison Hodge-Wusters. The other point you might consider is diversity of your board members.
Okay. Okay. Move on. Right. So the next slide, please. Okay. This is just a standard item. We do it every year, but we wish to have the authority to appoint an independent examiner. We've continued to use Lansdowns for many years now, and we'll probably do the same again next year. But your authority to go ahead with that. So I'm going to show some. Okay. Anyone against that? Okay. And then so the last item then is so ideas for the future. So this is Elva.
Is it on? Yes, it is. Good. So we said last year we were going to do a survey, and we have. We trialled it and then we ran it. We ran it in March. and we were really wanting to just get close to what are the needs and wishes of ringers for the publication and for the Ringer world overall and for Belmont as well. So there was quite a bit to cover, and we've got lots and lots of data. Thank you to everyone for completing it and for distributing the survey, and we'll be working through that data for some time to come. I can still go back in and there's like another thing I want to look at. I've written up a full report, a sort of, I don't know, 20-page summary of the report of the survey. You can see that online. You may have read it already, and we published bits about it through the publication over the last sort of 6 weeks or so. I'm just going to sort of summarise a few key points here, not go through the whole thing. Sorry, that should be 2800, so that's a typo. But what we wanted, just as a reminder, we wanted to really listen to people who are paying for this. We wanted to listen to subscribers. We also wanted to listen to those who aren't subscribing, who may be reading or may wish to subscribe should things be different. So there were two groups of people that we were really wanting to gather the views on. And we wanted to test out some options and get some answers to start feeding in where we're going regarding these questions that have come up so usefully today. Next slide, please. So we ran it in March, and a total of 2,162 completed, which is a good number. It was about 3,000-ish when the survey was a similar survey was run, 2016, I think it was. So it's about the same proportion if you look at the numbers compared to the total number of ringers. So I think it's probably as good a number as we might expect. Although I have to say, you know, I could track when the associations were getting their communications out. I could see it here online. Like, oh, that's WMP, right? Thanks very much, you know. So I could see that not everybody got this. Didn't reach your ringers, for sure. I could see that it didn't. So, you know, it's really interesting how impossible it is to communicate with all ringers. But we had 867 subscribers, so that's a good proportion of our current subscriber number for a survey. That's a good representative sample. In terms of non-subscribers, the number obviously, the number is more, the percentage is much less. And I would say it's representative of the most engaged ringers, the most connected ringers, those who have probably heard of the Ringer world already. So, but otherwise, it was probably a whole heap of ringers that this data doesn't really represent. You know, they're difficult to reach, let me put it that way. But the main points are that there were many compliments, many opinions, people said a lot, wrote a lot, really useful, and we will continue to work on it. We already feel we know better, you know, what is going to work. So it's so useful. And I could tell that some people are really getting some issues off their chests, so maybe that helped in some ways. You know, calendar being a different format, that came up. But the only other real bugbear really that came up with any vengeance was it was the funeral, wasn't it? There were some performances that weren't quarters, that weren't printed for the funeral publication, and there was upset around that. So you know, it was good to have that voiced and for us to hear it, and lots of comments and suggestions that we can act on and we already have. There were specific requests for special offers which we've acted on. So you know, this is a useful exercise to go through. There were requests for going on to sort of email listings, so that's also useful. Next slide. So these were some of the questions we had. There were lots of questions we had, but these were some of them. You know, what are the views on the paper now? And how does that compare with 6-7 years ago? How have we moved? And if you want the detailed answers, I would go to the published survey report. Next slide, please. just to highlight this, yeah, I'm in the orange block, so most of us are, right? So that's the age distribution. I have to say I've been running a lot of surveys over the last few years for ringers, and this is the age distribution of the ringers. You know, it really comes whichever way, however we approach it, this is how we are. And you know, we just need to embrace that. I think. Next slide. What I discovered, and I kept looking at other variables because I sort of didn't want it to be this obvious, if you like. But this was the only real one there was. The only real variable I could see that told me whether people were going to subscribe or not, and whether it was going to be paper or digital, was age. That was the major variable. So we're talking about a generational issue, I would say, an age issue. So you've got the blue one is the printed version, and you can see the preference for printed. As you get older, the preference for digital goes down as you get older, and the no's are most likely to be in their 20s. They're not seeing it. They're not subscribing. They might be reading it though. There's quite a lot of people reading it who aren't subscribing it. So that's really interesting. And of course, if we're starting to think, should we continue to print and mail out a weekly paper, we need to know who we're going to upset, right? If we're going to be changing that. So we can see who have the views. We can see who has the views. And I would imagine this was the same a while ago. Next slide, please. So what other findings do we have? So, well, we love Bellboard. Yes, Bellboard is really important to us. To many ringers, they look at it a lot, and it's really, really valuable. It came up as the most valuable thing that we do. It's really, really good for us. The youth contest came up as really important as well, although I noticed that the older you were, the less you appreciated it. But maybe that sort of goes without saying. And to be absolutely honest with you, if you haven't been involved in a youth contest, it's a bit hard to even understand what it's about. It's because it's such a different sort of event. Love the front covers. So Will's been doing a lot of effort on the front covers. Anything you want to say about that? But we love them. No, it's good. We love them. The special editions, we love the special editions, and we had a few of those in the course of the year. We also really care about accurate records of performance. That's important to us. So if we think somebody's messing with that, we're going to get upset. So that whole aspect of what we do, we need to really make sure we take care of it. Yeah, history we love. So you know, the detail of Gareth mentioned history. Yes, we are interested in history. That's what we're into, and we like being able to see the records. And we do really appreciate being connected to the community. It's very important to us. It is intrinsically a team thing that we do. So it's not just about our band, but it's about what we do with the ringing world is the wider connection outside of your own band. And that social side is super, super important. Next slide. So what the key thing we found, apart from lots of this detail, is that there's two groups of ringers. There's a bunch who, and I'm slightly exaggerating this for the sake of making a point, but it's very clear that those in the 60 to 80-year-old age bracket who have learnt when they're young, they generally love the weekly paper. Do not mess with it. Do not stop. I want it. Right? That is the position of many and most of that group. Hands up if you sort of relate to a little bit of that. Yeah, I thought there'd be quite a number in here. Okay, do not mess with it. I like it. You're likely to be highly experienced. You definitely in the advanced category of method ringing. You ring quarters, but you might have rung a lot of peals in your past, but you might not be ringing so many peals now. So it's definitely giving you that connection to the community, probably. You also like Bellboard, but you do like reading that printed matter. Yes, that's what you want. And you want the performances to be published there. Why not? They've always been there. Why shouldn't they be there? Not so sure about the youth contest. Covered that already. But there's an appreciation, definitely, about the importance and purpose of what we're doing, which is great. And I endorse that myself. I think it's highly, highly valuable. Like you say, it's the paper for the bell ringers. And there's a satisfaction with weekly. What's wrong with that? And some of this group subscribe, and some of them don't. So this goes for non-subscribers feeling these things as well. So that's one bunch of people. Next slide. The other bunch of people, a bigger number, funnily enough, but they're likely to be under 60. They might be more likely to be less advanced in standard ringing. They might ring some plain hunt, plain bob type of thing, rounds, chord changes. They're more open to, they do WhatsApp, email for sure, and more on TikTok and all that sort of thing. There's a definite preference for something less often than weekly. Fortnightly or monthly is about the same, but definitely it's like, why don't we have a weekly? And they don't see why performances should be published in the paper at all. They're on Bellboard. I don't need anything else. They might read it still, but they don't really subscribe, these people, because they just don't get why would you do that. And there's also an ethical edge to the opinions from some of these people, the younger particularly. It's like, I don't believe it's right to be printing something weekly. So we who are over 60 need to understand that there's this different philosophy and ethics. I mean, my boys are 17 and 18, and if I were to say to them, would you ever pay for a weekly paper that gets through your door? And they look at me as if I was an alien. It's like, why would you do that? They have lessons in school about not doing such a thing. There's been a tidal wave of opinion change, and we need to be a little bit aware of that, because we can alienate the young if we're not careful. These people might ring peals, and they're just less impressed with the whole thing, really. Just don't quite see the value of it. They've either already got their own community well there, or they're sort of comfortable in their own community, and they're less likely to donate. So they're not parting with their money, these people. So what should we do for them? But they are a bigger number. So this survey has clarified this. It's quite hard to know what to do with this. So where we've got to, and conversations are still ongoing, and love to have your views. Do come and talk to us through today, tomorrow, and obviously in this meeting. But do you want to go on to the next slide? What we're thinking of doing is to trial an approach, actually, and do something for those people who are saying, look, I want something different. I want it to look more modern. I want it not to have performances in. I want it to really have a different feel to it, be thicker, less often. It might be just 3 times a year. Who knows? It might be monthly. It might be 3. I don't know. We don't know yet how that might look. But that's what we're thinking of doing, and we're starting to put some plans together as to how to do that. And we'll trial it and see how it goes. It will require a different financial model to support it, probably. More focus on advertising. It might be more useful for advertisers. So we'll see. But I'll be happy to have suggestions, ideas. That's where we're up to. Next chart, that's it. So any questions on that?
John Harrison, Oxford Diocesan Guild. 2 questions on your graph of subscription versus age. I noticed that the under-20s are massively out of line with the general curve. They're up among the 50s. Do you know why the under-20s in that blue line there are so high? And the second question, the young ones at the moment who are very much skewed to one end, in 40 years' time, they will be 40 years older. Will they have acquired the characteristics of or will they still be like they are now? In other words, is it a generational thing or is it an age thing?
I wish I knew. The under 21 group there, the data from the under 21s was actually quite difficult to get my head around. I think it was a bit of an odd group of under 21s that completed it, actually. Yeah, and the numbers, of course, were smaller in that group, and there weren't that many that came through to actually complete the survey. So I wouldn't take that too seriously, that particular bit of that. There's loads of questions, I can tell. Who wants to go next? Who's got this? Go for it.
Peter Scott, Yorkshire Association. Was there any response to the idea, why is it so difficult online to read the ringing well? Why is it that if I read them, shall we say, The Guardian or perish the thought, the Daily Mail, that I could see each article as a separate web page?
There were comments about digital, and that's something we need to look at. You know, do we need to change the way we're doing that? Yeah, that's on the list.
Robert Lewis, Middlesex County Association and London Dance Guild. Elva, you mentioned that bellboard is now the most popular thing that the ringing world does, and I just wondered whether the board has made any further steps towards monetising it, and if so, how?
Interesting question again. That is definitely one of those things we were testing out with the survey. There wasn't a huge amount of positivity for that idea from the ringers, so that was interesting. But we haven't shut that down. We haven't got clear. Is there anything you want to say?
No, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, that was one that I was very, very interested in because, you know, like the question previously about this, that our reliance on donations is always very fragile, and obviously monetising something which is very, very popular, which it clearly is it could be a way forward. So I was very interested in what they said. It was interesting that people came back and they weren't terribly keen on that idea. Now, whether that's just because they don't like parting with their money, I don't know, or whether they just thought, well, if we do that, then I should no longer look at bellboard. It's very difficult to work that out. So it's a very difficult decision for us to make, really, because what we don't want to do is break it. You know, we could easily break it if we do that.
Yes, I mean, something that's been available for free to start charging is difficult, so it could be there's a way we can consider new functionality, new features that then are available at a cost. Yeah, exactly. That's something we're still thinking about. Yeah, we need to talk to Richard.
Peter Harrison, Antep. Just to follow on comment from what John Harrison said about young ringers, will they change and so forth, I think the answer is a definite yes. I remember as a young ringer, you know, I was in my teens, I didn't have the income to be able to subscribe to all these sort of things. And so that's probably one of the reasons why you start to see more subscriptions as people get older. They've got a disposable income. The other thing is, it was sort of, not eaten into me or anything like that, but yeah, I was encouraged to subscribe to the ring world as I became a young adult, and I was earning, and said, like, you know, it's something that's part of the ringing community, and it's an available thing, a valuable resource to continue to have, and that's the reason why I started to subscribe, and I still subscribe. The one thing that's on a different subject is the online side of things. I've mentioned this before with these AGMs. It's really, really important for the international community. Because the just pure cost of actually getting the paper version shipped over to Australia or the USA or South Africa, wherever, is so much more. So the digital version I've said before, is an absolute godsend, and I really, really appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, a key point I haven't raised, but is really clear, is that it's effectively in the same format that it's been for a long, long, long time, and the time when it was news, and with Bellboard and other methods now, we don't quite have the need for the news bit of that. So we still haven't worked that out. But I had my father happened to be reading one of his old diaries, and my father is 88 and has been ringing since he was 15. And in this diary, he was 19 and he went to London to ring, a special trip to ring in London, and he had a bed and breakfast, and he was staying there a week to really go and grab all the bells. And it was clearly a very exciting week, and he went to the trouble of redirecting his delivery of the ringing world to his B&B. What a thing to do! You didn't want to miss out on one copy being late, and therefore when he got home, I mean, you sort of forget that actually that's how it used to be. It's not like that now. Have we quite got the right flavour?
Robert Perry, Truro, Dossers and Guild. Speaking as someone who regretfully is well to the right of the age range, which is shown on the screen, I have the benefit, if that's the right word, of remembering the past. And it must be about 20 years ago that the then board considered publishing what I'll call a secondary publication. And it never happened for various reasons. I'd just like to suggest that the board would need to consider very, very carefully indeed any move in that direction, given what I still think is the fragile finances of the ringing world as it is today. We've received a very encouraging financial report for 2022, and we're told that 2023 will be just as good. But if there are no things to inspire additional ringing, no royal events or no other national events of that kind, and if we go back to the level of donations which we've become accustomed to over the past years, the figures will go down, they'll go the wrong way. And we don't want, I would say, but we don't want to lose the primary publication we all read and see every week. We wouldn't want that to suffer just because a new publication is abstracting resources which might have no future in it.
Totally get your point, and we appreciate that too. Yeah, we want to make sure we continue satisfying our main subscribers.
Hello, Alistair Dawson, Peterborough. Just following up on Rob Lewis's comment just now, forgive me if I get the terminology wrong. If there are more people landing on the Bellboard front page than the Ringing World front page, are we using the front page of Bellboard enough to promote the Ringing World and particularly the Ringing World shop? I haven't got any particular suggestions, it's not my strength, but rather than monetize it, just make sure there are lots of links across.
Another thing to think about.
Coming back on what Peter Harrison said, and I promise this is not a namesake stitch-up. In terms of young ringers, when I first subscribed to the Ringing World in my teens, it was bought for me as a Christmas present. When I left home, I then started buying my own, but the momentum had already been set, so maybe, and that might also explain why that spike in your under 21, if somebody's buying it for them.
Yeah, it could be, yes.
But it'd be worth considering, giving people a start.
David Smith, ANZAD. Two of the characteristics that appeared in the list for your Group B or Group 2 or whatever it was that were rather disturbing is that they don't subscribe and don't donate. Is there any evidence that by producing this possible quarterly magazine or whatever it is, that would actually change, or is this just basically optimism?
That's what we want to test out. Yeah, we're being optimistic. We're going to test without destroying what we have. That's the plan. Be cautious, but try other things. Yeah. Tristan.
Raymond Harwood, Norwich Diocesan Association. In yesterday's publication, you had a two-page spread about this lady that presumably had cancer. Are you going to do anything in the future to prevent that type of situation occurring, or policing?
That's a whole other topic, isn't it? Yeah. But really interesting, because it's been published, yeah.
That is clearly another topic. Yeah. I did anticipate that somebody would ask that sort of question. Basically, the Ringing World isn't in a position to either influence or not influence these things. We basically report on them only. If other people want to take up the cause and try and stop these things happening, then we won't stand in their way, but we only report.
Tristan Lockhart, Leeds University Union. So 2 points from me, really, is that I think some members have assumed that people follow the same life progression as they have in terms of subscribing to a printed copy and to the same format. If I it's silenced. Oh, there we go. So I'd agree that people more like to subscribe.
I don't think Dave likes what you're going to say. He's using you.
Thank you. Right. The progression through your life, so you have more time to read, more income. Okay, that's still going to happen. But are young people who have never really subscribed to anything printed, to anything which is a weekly publication, are they? I don't think they're necessarily going to turn into someone who's going to read that sort of stuff in that sort of format. So I think we just have to be careful looking 30 years into the future, assuming that they're going to be like the 50-year-olds of today. But also my second point is, with the urge for caution towards a sort of second publication, I mean, realistically, if we don't make any changes, is the financial situation of the Ringing World ever going to get any better? Is there suddenly going to be an influx of subscribers, or are costs going to go down significantly so that we can get more income with the same number of subscribers? And I'd venture that the answer to that is probably no, in which case undergoing a bit of risk to try and find a new, more sustainable format might be a good idea.
Michael Church, Wichita and Portsmouth Diocesan Guild. I'm sure that the board realise the amount of reserves which they're holding are immense. They're very large, much larger than are needed, even if you were forced to close the Ringing World down, as is mentioned in the accounts. And I think you should innovate. And I think if you do innovate and you make a decision which isn't financially great, you've got enough reserves there in order to change your mind. For example, the calendar was not a success this year. It hasn't been terminal, and therefore she'll go back to what it was before. A few of us in the room will remember the diary changed its format significantly many, many years ago. It became a pocket fold-out. It was an absolute disaster. It didn't cripple the Ringing World, and we went back to the original format. So I think that, as Robert Perry mentioned a little earlier, I think that nothing can be lost by innovating when you've got the reserves that you have at the moment.
Yeah. And I think the other point is that actually a lot of people in that survey, I'm talking 750 people or so, were basically saying, I want something different. So let's give it a go. Let's see if we can find something they might be prepared to pay for. Andrew.
Andrew Wilby, College News. Can I just add to that little story from my former colleague sitting next to me? The diary there's a nice anecdote about it, because I actually negotiated with Bill Vickers to buy it. It was one of the best deals I've ever done. It cost us an annual diary to him for life. That was quite good, really. But he warned us that we really shouldn't ever risk changing the shape of it. And you know that he said it was based, now some of you are not going to understand this, it was based on the size of a waff's top pocket. We wondered whether his wife had been a waff, and I believe that she had been. So you can see how this came about. Anyway, he warned that they tried to change it once, and it was a disaster. Everybody buys it the first year, and then if they don't like it, his sales drop the next year. When my colleagues failed to take notice of my very wise advice on this, went for a slim line, that's exactly what happened. Now, I know people don't necessarily put them in the top pockets anymore, but just be warned, don't try changing the shape of it. It doesn't work.
Noted. Thank you. Okay, any others?
Chris Tennant, Worcestershire and District Change Ringing Association. My daughter was probably one of the people under 21 who answered that. She may even be half of it. Because under 21s like the paper printed copy because they're reading their parents' copy. So that's why I picked it. The other thing was donations to Bellboard. On a number of occasions, we spent 5 minutes putting the court appeal on, and 45 minutes trying to donate. So that might want a little bit of looking at. I wonder how many other people have tried to donate and just gone, I can't be bothered now. After it's crashed a few times on them. It may have changed.
We do get periodic comments to the office on this point, that it's difficult to donate, and that was one of the reasons we worked quite hard on a question about why you donate, why you don't donate in the survey. And we were actually really surprised by the low figure that came out for people not donating because it was too difficult. It was much less than I expected. Yes, actually, you're the exception, sorry.
That's good news, isn't it? It's not hard. When it works, it's quick and easy. It's just when it doesn't, which could be our end, of course, too.
More pragmatically, the problem might be taken out of our hands because PayPal are urging us quite heavily to move on to their new platform, which I think will completely transform that donation experience when it happens. So.
That's the other thing, there's an idea to monitorise things. I think we spoke to you before, Will. Over the years, there's been lots of series in the ringing world. Things like What's Up the Tower? Use them as books. Great gift ideas. So we'd buy them. I think we've got a house full of books.
Keep the ideas going, thank you, yeah. Anything else?
Nick Elks, Peterborough. I'm looking around the room, we're all here as Central Council reps. Why is this meeting not open to more ordinary subscribers or perhaps people who might not be subscribers yet?
I expect my research I believe it's a condition of the article.
Well, it's a formal limited company, and this is the annual general meeting of the limited company.
Thank you. Fred Bone, Essex Association. Something I'm slightly surprised that we haven't raised before. How many people in this room are subscribers?
So we're talking to the converted mostly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have the results from the prize draw. Yes, well, Robert and Sir Gareth, so they're all duly elected. So there was, yes, the majority was 4 in all cases. So those are duly elected. So, yeah, sure, okay. So the total people voting was 124. Velvet got 121 votes, Robert got 122, and Gareth got 122. That was probably done. Robert, you're more. Excellent. Okay, right. So, both any other business is that? Yeah. So we take that from the board. Yeah. And any other business?
Thank you. Anthony Ellis, Hereford Guild, but also connections to the Guild of Clerical Ringers. I noticed on the publications you didn't show the Voice of the Church publication, which the Guild of Clerical Ringers has produced for the ringing community. I want to thank Will for producing this and for the ringing world to produce this, because this is an attempt by the group of clergy who realised that there are a lot of unringable vicars about, and we want to get as many of our publication into the hands of these unringable clergy and other church leaders. And if you can please buy this excellent publication which we produce, I think we can do something with some of the clergy who are not always very receptive to ringers. But thank you, Will, for all your work and for the excellent publication that you produced.
I think, to be fair, it was not mentioned because that was the 2022 list of publications, so it'll come up next year.
Well, I wanted to advertise it.
What's it called?
What's it called? The Voice of the Church. It's on the available outside.
Make sure your bishop has one.
He has already.
Linda Garton, Bedfordshire Association. I just thought it shouldn't go without note. Having been a bit involved in the ringing world in the past, how much hard work goes into producing it by the board, how much hard work you all put into it, and particularly thank you to Will, because the publication is unrecognisable from what it was when I first started taking it many years ago, and it's a really high quality, brilliant publication. So thank you everybody for all your hard work that you put into it.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. So, declare the meeting now closed. You may have your lunch.
For those people who can bring lunch here, it's available for
Who you see? No idea.